Welcome to BOZAR. Welcome to this grand theater. No people.
Thank
For
you.
the
We're
next
very pleased.
for the next edition in the online series of interviews with writers and thinkers for another world called Repairing the Future. Now, after publishing three books of poetry in Arabic, Mazen Maarouf, our guest of today, writer, poet, journalist, translator, he burst onto the global scene with his first collection of short stories called Jokes for the Gunmen, in de uitstekende Nederlandse vertaling van Richard van Leeuwen. Maarouf's stories are deeply peculiar, occasionally touching, and often very funny. Mazen Maarouf was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon, born in 1978 in the middle of the war, which lasted until 1990. Afterwards, he studied chemistry, but he also started publishing journalism and poetry from a very young age. And in 2011, at the beginning of the Syrian revolution, his vocal support for the uprising got him into political trouble. So he was forced into exile. And thanks to ICORN, the International Cities of Refuge Network, he ended up in no less than Reykjavik, Iceland, a country without an army. We're very happy that he's with us here online in BOZAR for Repairing the Future. Mazen, right now, I wish you would receive a huge, warm round of welcoming applause from a full audience, but unfortunately, that's not the case.
Thank
Where?
you very much for inviting me. I'm pleased and I'm honored, and I think it's quite symbolic. Probably I wouldn't say I prefer to be online at this moment, but I think in 2020 to be we can, while we are supposed to travel easily and connect easily, now we see that we are neighbors and we can travel very, like, in the normal times it's short travel, but now we have to do it from a distance. It symbolizes something. It tells something that's very significant about the absence of people, the invisibility of this audience, which also very consistent with the invisibility of millions of people who have been oppressed
Mhm,
by the system, and working constantly for the privilege of very, very few people
mhm,
across the globe.
mhm,
So I think it's really symbolic and powerful to have no audience in a way. And it's like a slap that, for example, should like slap, I feel that should awaken me more,
mhm,
that I have to do an interview, but there is no audience. Like
mhm.
this is
Yeah,
something quite like,
the
the
absence of the.
invisibility of the people is this is, it's not like that the need of audience or not. It's like that, like people have to communicate while they are invisible
Mhm.
in a way.
So having this empty theater, the invisibility of the audience reminds us of the people who are made invisible by the system we live in. Where are you right now, actually?
I'm now in Reykjavik. I was actually very, very scared from the very beginning like I started to follow up with COVID in January, like every day, following with the news reports, because I was sensing that something is really, really terrible coming over Europe
Mhm,
from, like whatever, like China, or it's something that you can't stop. And I was like terrified, panicked, but I kept it within close circle of friends who would occasionally take it very like, make fun or, oh, come on, you're exaggerating and you're
mhm,
over paranoid or something. But then by the end of February, we recorded the first case of COVID in Reykjavik, and everybody panicked. And unfortunately, people behaved in a very responsible way here, and they could really respect the social distancing without the need of police to control, or even, these probably applications that are now, that I'm not sure how good they are, like in controlling, monitoring
mhm,
people more and more. So I think I'm quite lucky, and I actually live in a system where you can really be isolated.
Hmm.
I think of my friends in the Middle East, for example,
Hmm.
who cannot be isolated, who don't have the privilege to be isolated. They
Hmm.
have to work constantly. They have to be, they don't live under a system that support them socially, financially. So I think, this is very powerful times now where, like, back to the point that finally the privileged class, like the very, very privileged class and the very minority, realized for the first time that they need these invisible
Hmm.
people, the
Hmm.
workers of everyday life,
Hmm.
the street workers, the postmen, the nurses,
Hmm.
all these people who have been oppressed and who have been like very strongly engaged in this oppression, like that they don't dare to protest against it,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
to lose anything. So it's like, and yeah, I was isolated here for probably, I was at home for probably 2 months and a half.
Hmm.
I didn't go out except for grocery shopping. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Must be so bizarre because you're basically safe. You're living in one of the most peaceful places on the planet, and I guess all the time you're communicating with your family and your friends in Beirut, in Palestine, some of the most troubled places on the planet. How do you deal with that schizophrenia?
Yeah, definitely. I live geographically in a city, but mentally in another place,
Hmm.
and I can't orient my life here in Reykjavik apart from, like thinking like how people are doing there, and also I communicate with my family constantly. My parents, who are old and they live by themselves in Lebanon still,
Hmm.
and I see how, like how the situation is like really dysfunctional there and very functional here.
Hmm.
And this, like, I don't dare actually to boast about it or to brag or, to celebrate how lucky we are here,
Hmm.
because it's very unfair in some way, I think.
In it is unfair, and I'm wondering, you're a writer. For a writer, let's say lockdown is more or less a natural state, as opposed to a lot of other people, the invisible people you mentioned, who don't have that privilege. Uh, have you been able to concentrate, to focus?
Couldn't help following up with the news and reading, what's going on, and trying to figure out. I mean, you have to worry all the time about the state, and the state media, and are they telling the truth or not?
Hmm.
How much of the truth it's being told? Also about all these numbers and tests, are they significant or not? Because you're testing some people. So I was really like living this, like, I mean, this dystopian scene. I
Mm.
couldn't get myself out of it. And then gradually I started to, let's say, be able to do some balance between my writing, because I'm working on something now, on a book, and then fall panicking, let's say,
Mm.
so. And writing was a little bit, because I'm writing about something that happens in another time frame. So it saved me little bit, could take me for a couple of hours every day to
Mhm.
another reality. But I think, yeah, like, and usually here in Reykjavik, I have very few friends, and I am most of the time doing things by myself.
Mhm.
So it was very bizarre for me to be
Mhm.
isolated. But under these circumstances, you can't be selfish and egoist and think only of yourself.
Mhm.
You have to see how things are
Yeah.
getting ruined around the world.
In the meantime, strangely enough, this period has also offered unexpected moments of beauty, of silence, of uh, poetry, maybe even. Have you been able to open up to any of that?
So, of course, the good thing about it is that you're able to sit with yourself, to go back to your, like thoughts and life, and try to do plans, and try to think of your, deeds and mistakes, and what you have done wrong, or what are you gonna do. And I think it was really, really, I'm sorry to say that, but it's really good for me that after, because I've been working on this book for 2 3 years now,
Mhm.
and I could really like come up with the ingredients that I am happy with only during the lockdown.
Mhm.
So it was like probably I needed to be grounded, or I don't
Mhm.
know what. Like,
Mhm. How does the Tell us a little bit about the book. I've been reading that you've been working on a novel. I don't know if this is still the case. I'm very curious how this new sense of dystopia creeps into your writing. Or are you able to keep it outside of your writing?
well, like I grew up in Lebanon in 1978. 1978 was this year between the end of the first round of the civil war in Lebanon, what's called civil war, and then which ended in 1977. And so I was born in 1978, and then the Israeli invasion in Beirut happened in 1982, and the PLO were kicked out of
Hmm.
Beirut at that time, and the whole political scene in Lebanon changed, and new forces emerged and took over. And so it was like I was born in this, like, time between these two critical moments
Hmm.
in the history of Lebanon, in the history of the Middle East in general. And my childhood was like mainly, melange of this dystopia, world that is not functioning, but people are trying to make it function. We didn't have anything to protect us. We were just left to the probability of to the possibility of death at any moment as kids. and
Hmm.
and I personally lost friends when I was kid, but in a car, in a missile that fell in our street and burned our home. And I was like also having shrapnel in my back. And so,
Hmm.
I mean, so these dystopic images and dystopic childhood, I think it keeps with you for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
And then you write from that place. You have to write from that place at some point in order to surpass it, in order to like to just write something. So I'm still there.
Hmm.
And of course, the we were too oppressed that we couldn't dare to, we didn't have any means, any power to come up and rise against this oppression, because it's militias, and it's like and as Palestinians as well, we were kind of punished as Palestinians due to the deeds of PLO and mistakes of the PLO in Lebanon. So like it's so like this topic. And I think in some way there is a harmony at some level, at some bottom line. There is some kind of harmony between what's going on now on the global sense.
Hmm.
You can pick up some elements and see that they are really similar.
Hmm. Hmm. And then again, how does this current crisis creep into your writing?
I don't know actually, but for example, I tried to drift myself away from this, the intensity of the news
Mm.
and the horror behind it.
Hmm.
And when you do that, definitely you want to read more, you want to watch more movies, you want to take yourself to another reality. And I think by doing this, it was more intense than usual. And plus the possibility of, like, oh my God, I might die at any moment, I might get infected or something, I have to hurry up.
Hmm.
So I had to be more active in
Hmm.
some way in writing and going through ideas. So it's like,
Yeah,
the panic triggered in a way, of course, helped in some way, in
hmm,
some creepy way, the writing
I
process.
see, I see. This series of interviews, as you know, is called Repairing the Future.
Yeah.
But um, some people say that the climate crisis, that is, of course, ongoing, and now the corona crisis, has robbed us of our future. Greta Thunberg, for instance, the great young
Yeah.
climate activist. She says, "You have robbed us of our future." How are you in this? Do you believe we have a future? Do you believe you have a future? Are you able
You know,
to go to that future?
yeah, I think I was triggered actually by the term repairing the future. And then I thought about the term itself. So it's like as if you are admitting that our future will be dysfunctional at some point. It will have some defaults, and we have to see like what to do from now in order to fix these defaults. But at the same time, there is some underlining admission, or like you're admitting that we are not gonna be able to do something. It's like you're asking somebody from the past, okay, listen, in 2020 we are going to have this crisis, and we can't do anything from now to prevent that. But what do you think about, like, what must we do in order to repair this future? I think the key point here is to repair our present. Like, we
Hmm.
need to start from now.
Hmm.
If I compare like what's going on in Europe now to the 1930s, that
Hmm.
was before the Second World War.
Hmm.
These years between Wall Street, 1929 and 1933, the rise
Hmm.
of Nazi party in Germany, and so on. I think we are way behind, because if you measure the amount of technology that we have and the way we are using it against us, and in order, like,
Hmm.
against the benefit of humanity, and for the privilege of only few people, I think we are really going back.
Hmm.
And I think we can't step into any future without social justice. So,
Hmm.
like, start from Black Lives Matter, let's say, it it tells you about the supreme arrogancy of the system that is ruled by these white men or people,
Hmm.
who, in the amidst of this crisis, they dare to announce their suppression, to oppression, their oppression
Hmm.
against colored people
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
black people. Or
Hmm.
so so I think without we have to start from achieving the social, some sort of social justice, in order to be able to step into a future that doesn't privilege a system or
Right.
state, you know, on the shoulders, or like on behalf of, or on account
Hmm.
of people.
Hmm.
Like, the state must not be like, because we live in states that are meant in a way to be blossoming and prospering, but on the shoulders
Exactly.
of people.
Hmm.
So people work and spend their lifetimes and die, and they don't really enjoy life, just for the prosperity of very, very few
Hmm.
individuals who run this
Hmm.
system. So
So
there is something wrong about it.
I'm I'm with the people who say if anything good can come out of this, that we call 2020 the new year zero, and get rid of all the inequality that we've developed so fantastically over the past century. Uh, can you live with that idea? Starting again, year zero, total reset?
Well, I think the system as we know is collapsing. Actually,
Hmm.
when you see like all these like giant companies who were supposed to, nobody would have imagined that this any financial damage will happen to them. They are all going bankrupt. And when you see that, like millions of people are getting unemployed now for the privilege of very, very few people whose wealth has raised by more than 6 million, billion, sorry, 600 billion dollars. So it's like there is something that is not, and all these bailing outs of the
Hmm.
governments to protect small companies, and these small companies are not are supposed to protect the bigger companies, and the bigger companies to protect the elite. So again, uh, like these kinds of measures, they are anti-capitalist. Actually,
Hmm.
this is not like, this doesn't go in a harmony with the system, how it functions, and
Hmm.
how it's supposed to be. But I think also it tells us about how capitalists work, capitalism work, because like it favors only few people who have the privilege over, like starting from two people, one want to sell something to another person. There is something wrong about it, because like one person is getting, both are getting benefits. In a way, I need something, I pay money, but the other guy is getting more benefits. So for example, a big company like X or Y or Z, like having like an owner of the company now, for example, must be considered as a partner with all these customers,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they all are involved in this process of
Mm-hmm.
trading, that but it only privilege him,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
person. And it's really ridiculous to
Yeah.
see, like, I think something definitely has to be changed. But mainly, let's say, I'm not any communist or anything, but I think the idea of like huge wealth, like billions and billions of money in the hand of one person, and then you have billions of people really poor, and
Mm-hmm.
they have
Mm-hmm.
nothing essential in their lives. So the whole idea is, it's like disgusting.
Yeah.
Actually, it's like you can't understand how a system can privilege. And I think the key point here is that we lack laws. We lack,
Mm-hmm.
with openness of these digital media, with the free trade, between brackets free, because it helps enslaving people under the term free trade or whatever. So the whole idea is like, is dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's why I think I totally agree, and I think we are living in a completely political moment
Mm-hmm.
at the moment. Coronavirus is a very political moment. It's like a moment of change, and then with what happened to George Floyd, it's like
Mm-hmm.
the supreme arrogancy of this system against the oppressed people is demonstrated in the most stupid way. Like, they killed this man under coronavirus. It
Mm-hmm.
symbolizes how brutal this
Yeah.
system. It's not
Yeah.
about the two policemen or one or whatever. It symbolizes something very, very big
Mm-hmm.
there.
The corona crisis is a political moment. I don't think I've heard anybody say it as shortly and clearly as that yet. It overwhelms me a little bit to hear this fierce and true analysis coming from you, the writer of stories that don't flinch from violence and don't flinch from horror, but are still in a unique way so funny, so light-footed, so imaginative. But right now we're hearing the undercurrent of Mazen Maarouf's world.
Yeah,
And the
the the
undercurrent,
the,
the undercurrent
the
is
dramatic
dark.
Palestinian. Yeah,
Hmm. That.
Palestinians are dramatic by nature. I was telling you this under, like,
Hmm.
before we started. So it's like probably this dramatic, like, component of mine, always ready to take over and see things like in a
Hmm.
pessimistic way.
It's. I don't think in these times you can call this dramatic. I think you're giving a very clear, very honest analysis of the situation. The weird thing is, uh, your story is now coming from an island, from Iceland. We're going to see what's going to happen. The system is going to collapse. Uh, Major catastrophes are going to follow this one. Could it be that um, uh, islands will be the only safe place for us in the future?
I mean, the whole idea of the social media is also very weird, because it's meant to connect us, but it isolates us. It isolates everybody. It feeds the ego of everybody, and it feeds people on, like, or it feeds on frustrating people and manipulating them. But I think we are social creatures, and what we need is communication. What we need is absolutely, like, to be living without. I'm not being utopic, but we really need to get down these, like, considerations of borders and
Hmm.
like, and differences, racial differences, let's
Hmm.
say, because of course we thrive on differences. Like, we need different people around us, like different views, in order to. but not different in a way that would promote inhumane acts. Let's say you can't come and I can't come and say about somebody who's calling for killing black people. Yeah, we need different views. This is ridiculous. Not
I
like that.
see what you
But
mean.
yeah, so I think on the contrary, we islands are, like for example, here in Iceland, people, when you live on an island and you don't have neighbors, there is something feeds into your ego because you are the master of this land. You think this is the end of this haven of yours, and this is your place. So it's like I'm not sure living on islands is a healthy way,
Mm.
unless, for example, you have systems that are really really good enough to to secure social justice for people.
Hmm.
So I think once we have once we like, I mean, we are 2020. This is
Hmm.
so ridiculous. 2020, we are still talking about endings like slaving
Hmm.
of like millions of people, stop the oppression against like black people in the United
Hmm.
States and colored people and immigrants and so on. So there is something that's like um, we need to promote diversity,
Hmm. Hmm.
definitely.
Hmm. Diversity of voices of writers as well. I mean, you just described your youth in the horrors of the war in Lebanon. Uh, Still, your stories, your poetry seems to be a way to get beyond that, to leave it behind you, as you said earlier.
Well, I think for myself, I'm not brave enough to confront my real, to write nonfiction, very simply.
Hmm.
Because I think I have to go back, I have to go through see a number of traumas and aggressive situations and oppressions and all kinds of mistreatments and messed up situations in Lebanon to go through that. Like so that's why I use imagination as a to flee,
Hmm.
something,
Hmm.
to escape from something, but also to establish sort of let's say insecure reality that I'm not part of, because I know, for example, these kids in my stories are subjected to horrible situations, and I get intense, like I mean, nervous or tensed while I'm writing a story about them, or but then I know that I'm not there at the end. The whole story is gonna be the story of these characters, and I'm not really part of it physically.
Hmm.
So it's like I think it's more because I'm not brave enough to write nonfiction. I
Hmm.
just go to this like you know grotesque
Hmm.
probably
Hmm.
ways of writing.
You're offering us some kind of ways out of the horror that we could never imagine ourselves, because the kids in your stories are so inventive. They think of solutions that nobody ever, certainly no adult, would ever come up with. Your work is also proof that these horrors will always come back to haunt you. Whatever you do, you can't shake them off, you can't leave them behind you. How are we gonna deal with the traumatic situation of Corona that we are now in and hopefully will leave behind us?
I think you agree with me that we cannot really speak of in terms of billions of people. Everybody will have their own way of
Hmm.
dealing with the situation. What I loved about the lockdown, like that you have all these artists, who are people who never did art before, and then they came up with videos
Hmm.
or ways of like dealing with social media or with like video art or something in a way that's very natural and very creative. So like some people, it triggered this creative side in some people, and
Hmm.
I think this is one of the very good things. But um, but I don't know, I don't think I'm in any position that I can like tell what to do, but I think art is a great form, reading, like communicating with people, these are all like sharing stories. These are all great forms of
Mm-hmm.
soothing
Mm-hmm.
the horror in a way, or the trauma, let's say, in,
Yeah.
if I want to be maybe more precise in my what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I think, and definitely, like when I'm writing, I'm actually very happy that I have, let's say, I'm not very happy that I lived this horror years in Lebanon, but I am kind of, like I'm very okay with the idea that okay, this is my childhood. It's not good. It's what it is. But I can't do anything to change it. I can make something probably beautiful out of it, or that speaks to other people, that communicates with other people. Because what is beautiful about art in these horror times is that it takes us back to our essential beautiful emotions.
Mm-hmm.
If you're seeing good movie, for example, simple story, indie movie, like of really good story, it doesn't have to be complicated, but
Mm-hmm.
then it triggers out all these like beautiful emotions,
Mm-hmm.
sympathy with people, like love, all these like kindness, it, we need these essential emotions, because horror is very manipulative situation. It
Mm-hmm.
manipulates you into one kind of, it makes us aggressive
Mm-hmm.
in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like fortunately it didn't happen as in the movies, that when we have this topic situation, people eat each other, or like go down and everybody becomes zombie or something. It's very good that people were not like behaving like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think art is a great form of soothing this trauma
Mm-hmm.
in a way.
Thank you for saying so, because this is one of the things we can cling to even in these times. Strange thing in when following the news, at least here in Western Europe, it seems like the other catastrophes in the world are on hold somehow. Let's say the climate crisis or the bloody victory of Assad regime or the annexation of the West Bank. Are they on hold because of Corona, or are we just not, or is the Corona news in the Western world pushing them out of our view?
I think they are all part of the same system.
Hmm.
In a way that, for example, I'm sure that you're well informed about the Middle East and well educated about the situation there, and that we all know how the big powers, let's say the classical colonial powers, have never left the Middle East after
Hmm.
the Second World War.
Hmm.
So the mandate was just like the powerful mandate, or the power of mandate was transferred into new
Right.
power, that was the United States in the 50s, and which triggered the Soviet Union
Hmm.
interference, and which triggered then the French and the British interference, that want to secure their old colonies
Hmm.
and powers in the Middle East. And now, for example, what's going on in Libya, let's say,
Hmm.
or in Iraq, or in Syria, or
Hmm.
in Palestine, it's all about these systems that, for example, while we don't hear any interference when it comes to Rohingya people
Hmm.
who are killed and massacred there, because it doesn't fall into the benefit or the privilege of these colonial states
Hmm.
until now.
Hmm.
I'm sure that if something happens in Greenland, that's only 40,000 people, that would make United States believe that, oh, we have some economical wealth, or like privilege there, they would interfere.
Yeah.
But I think like it's been for years, like for decades, not years, like that the system is ongoing and like dysfunctioning from the early 70s. Like after 1968, what happened is that the economical system in the United States was reformed in a way to eat, these like the small wealth of people,
Hmm.
and trigger capitalism, and like, or in a bigger scale. And so, like global warming, political oppressions
Hmm.
all over the world, this hidden flirt with China sometimes,
Hmm.
and United States, the Russians. I mean, like the whole system, it's one network that
Mhm.
is ruining the lives of people who just want to be respected and to
And
to
that
live in diversity. And
the call for respect was at the heart of the great protest movements going on in Lebanon, in Iraq, uh, just last year, in Hong Kong, in Latin America. And Corona brought that to a halt for a bit. But now, again, we're seeing huge protests, in this case, the Black Lives Matter. So apparently there's a unrest, there's an activation, there's a mobilization of the people who've been oppressed by this system, which nothing can stop. This is maybe something to be excited about, at least.
yeah, exactly. I totally agree, because all these people, for example, in Palestine, in Lebanon, in United States, there is all kinds of racial or sector class, like discrimination or whatsoever. But if you reduce it to to just like the simple equation is that there is an oppressor and there is the oppressed, you
Mm.
know so, and the oppressor is always connected with the other oppressor, like,
Mhm.
because these oppressors keep the power among themselves on economical purposes. Now we can do a revolution probably, like, I used to believe before Corona and before all these demonstrations happening, like in United States mainly and the rest of the world, that we cannot do a revolution that is political. The revolution has to be economic,
Mhm.
because the our lives are administrated by big companies, by assets, by not by names. We don't know the, like, we know one individual, but we don't know really who is
Mhm.
in charge of this system, who are the people who can we protest against or something. But with coronavirus, that is the byproduct of this system itself, like the situation, because it tells us how the system, who it was privileging or benefiting. It was only, like, I mean, imagine healthcare system is not taken care of, so it's like something that tells you that the like that this system never really cared about lives of people in
Mhm.
a way. And then these billions and billions and billions of euros bailed out, and
Mhm.
suddenly, like, I never imagined that there is this sum of money in Italy or in Spain, or these countries that we know that economically they are not really doing great at the moment. So it's like, yeah, I think it's like the same battle on different fronts.
I know very few writers who are capable of recollecting a kid's mind in a situation of trouble, of horror, like you are. You're incredibly good at that. The confusion, the bewilderment, the stubborn search for a solution to whatever is on your way. So we want to ask you and the other participants in this series if you have something to say to this generation.
What I like about this, the state of Greta Thunberg, is that she, she represents a generation whose, like, tools are the social media, and they can really press the system very hard. They are more engaged than us in this social media language. I'm not really that engaged. For example, they can use it because it speaks their childhood, it speaks their lives, it speaks out their, like, their lifestyle. And I do believe that to this young generation, I think they should do their best to step into a better future,
Mhm.
because I think they have the moment now. They have the right circumstances, the right situation, and so yeah, it's the moment. I do believe.
Mazen Maarouf, you said the corona crisis is a political moment. Uh, you say this generation can grab the moment in order to reset the system that oppresses so many people, that makes so many people invisible. Your work is one of the ways that show us that there are always alternatives, there are always ways out that you never thought of before, and you've done so again today. So I really want to thank you for that, and I hope to see you here in BOZAR in real life very soon.
Thank you very much, and it was my pleasure and privilege.